Was the rapture invented by 19th century heretics, or was it actually taught by Jesus himself? That's what we're talking about today. You've probably heard the claim, right? Some say the rapture is a modern invention, foreign to church history, unknown to the early church, and certainly not something Jesus ever mentioned. But what if that's completely wrong? Let's dive in, but stay to the end because I have a few insights that most have probably not seen. In John 14, Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." Many have assumed that this is just a vague statement about believers going to heaven when they die. But this interpretation, it doesn't hold up when we examine the grammatical context of the passage. First of all, Scripture never describes the death of a believer as Jesus coming for them. In Luke 16, Lazarus is carried by angels, not by Jesus. In Acts 7, Stephen sees Jesus standing at the right hand of God, but Jesus does not descend to collect him. And in 2 Corinthians 5, Paul describes believers as absent from the body and present with the Lord, meaning the believer goes to Christ, not the other way around. John 14, however, speaks of something different. Jesus says, "I will come again and take you to myself." This is active and personal. It describes a deliberate event where Jesus himself returns to take his people somewhere, not wait for them to come to him. In addition, the verbs go and prepare are written in the aorist tense. Now, the aorist tense in Greek views an action as a complete whole, meaning it's like taking a snapshot of the action rather than watching it unfold moment by moment like a video. He speaks of his departure and preparation in heaven as settled realities, already determined in the plan of God. Even though these events were still future from the disciples' perspective, Jesus presents them with the certainty and finality of completed facts, as if saying, it's as good as done, which gives weight to his next statement where he says, "I will come again and take you to myself." His return is a guaranteed promise rooted in those completed realities. So just as Jesus physically left, he will physically return. If Jesus meant he, quote, receives each believer at the moment of their death, it would make more grammatical sense to use a present or imperfect tense, indicating an ongoing or reoccurring action, since death occurs individually and gradually across time for everyone. People die across centuries, not all at once. Basically, what Jesus is saying is, I really am going via the cross, resurrection, and ascension. I really will prepare a place for you in heaven in my Father's house, and because those things are true and complete, you can be absolutely sure that I will come back to take you there. Some might still wonder if this is simply referring to the second coming, but the description in John 14 doesn't fit the second coming either. At the second coming described in Revelation 19, Christ returns with his saints, not for them. He comes to judge the nations and establish his kingdom on earth. But in John 14, Jesus says he is coming to receive his followers and bring them to the Father's house, an entirely different setting and purpose. This points to a distinctive event separate from the second coming. It points to the rapture. This makes Jesus' promise in John 14 profoundly significant. He is unveiling something entirely new, something the Old Testament prophets never saw or predicted. The idea that the Messiah would come not to reign or judge or restore Israel immediately, but to personally gather his followers and take them to the Father's house in heaven was a hidden part of God's plan, now revealed. That's why Paul calls the rapture a mystery in 1 Corinthians 15:51. Not because it's confusing or hard to understand, but because it was deliberately kept secret until this moment. This promise introduces a distinct heavenly hope for the church, separate from Israel's earthly promises, and marks a whole new phase in God's redemptive timeline. The unveiling of the blessed hope that Paul speaks about, a joyful expectation that Christ could come for his people at any moment. Thomas Ice and other scholars point out that when we compare John 14:1-3 to Paul's teaching on the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 and 18, the similarities are undeniable. Both passages follow the same sequence. Troubled hearts are comforted by a promise. Jesus' personal coming is described, believers are gathered to him, and they are assured of being with him forever. Now, scholar J.B. Smith conducted a detailed comparison between 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18, which describes the rapture, and Revelation 19:11-21, which describes the second coming. His findings were absolutely amazing. There were no significant verbal parallels, no overlapping phrases, and no shared structure. The events, the language, and even the tone were entirely different. He concluded that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to find any two major prophetic passages in the New Testament that are more linguistically and thematically unrelated. This strongly suggests that they were describing two separate events. And when we compare John 14 to 1 Thessalonians 4, we find a tight, consistent progression of ideas and vocabulary, further confirming that Jesus and Paul were speaking or pointing to the same moment in prophetic history. The rapture of the church. Understanding that Jesus himself introduced the rapture, it matters deeply. It shows that the rapture is not a later invention or only a Pauline doctrine. It began as a direct promise from Christ to his disciples and was later expanded in detail by Paul to comfort the church. This means the church's prophetic expectation is living with the hope that Christ could return for us at any moment to bring us personally to himself, just as he promised. John 14, it gives us a prophetic roadmap. Jesus goes, he prepares a place for us, he comes back to us to bring us to him in the Father's house. That is the rapture, a guaranteed imminent event when the Lord will personally gather his bride and take her to the Father's house. It is not the second coming, and it is not what happens at death. It is a unique, blessed promise, and it could be fulfilled at any moment. My friends, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, share, all of the above. And in the meantime, take care and God bless.